We gaan beginnen.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this new episode of the Value Stream. My name is Robin.
And my name is Chris.
And in this episode, we would like to talk to you about product strategy. And there's a couple of different things that we would like to share with you and talk about in this episode. And that is, we're actually going to talk about 4 different angles around product strategy. And in this episode, we'll be talking a bit about overcoming switching costs, talking about growing versus stable markets. We'll be talking about aligning with the brand promise or fitting your product in the brand promise and being defensible against copy. And we'll be sharing some tips and concepts with you around those topics in this series. But like we did in the past few episodes too, let's first start off with a question.
Let's see.
And that is, of course, what is actually product strategy, do you think?
Absolutely. And let me also say it's great to see so many of you again attending, and I'm starting to see some familiar names, so it's great to see recurring customers.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you think about product strategy? What is it? And can you share in the chat?
Christopher is maybe cheating a little bit. And so is Martin and Fred. High-level direction to realize the vision. Awesome.
Oh, I like that.
Knowing when to stop spending money. That's a really good one.
Yeah, mainly which is of course the path to victory. Yeah? That's Miyamoto Musashi. Know your classics.
And the way to reach your goals. All right, awesome. Some good stuff coming in. So, Chris, what do we think about product strategy?
Yeah, so for us, I guess it's all things. So strategy is your road to victory. It's a sequence of steps that leads to your, in the end, winning with the product. But it's also about choices and luck, isn't it, Robin?
Yeah, I think so. Poker is probably a game where strategy is really important, and tactics are as well. There's people who play professional poker on a really good level for a reason. But there's some interesting books written about or from professional poker players too, talking a bit about how to make better decisions, and luck is definitely part of that.
Hey, but Robin, why did you pick poker and not like chess? Because typically when we talk about strategy, we have an image of chess.
Yeah, so that's it's an interesting book Andy Duke wrote about professional poker players and how they make decisions. And I think the interesting element is that in chess, basically all the pieces of the game are on the table. So all the information that we need is transparent. And probably if you would use some really good chess players or have a computer play against a different computer, pretty much all the possible moves could be calculated. So all the information is present. And with poker, more information is actually unknown than known. So that makes it a game of, both good choices, but also luck.
All right, thanks. Yeah, strategy is, of course, adaptable. It's something that changes, not something we say, this is the plan, and then we stick to it, and then everything is going to unfold exactly as we have written down. Yeah. So, yeah.
Nice comment, by the way, from Fred saying that luck is not a good strategy in poker. I would definitely agree to that. It's just one of the factors. And in the book from Annie, she mainly talks about how you make better decisions and how you evaluate good decisions or bad decisions. And it's important to take the factor of luck into account. So some decisions had a good result, but they were not necessarily good decisions. They were more based on luck. And that's something you see a lot of those poker players do. They evaluate decisions on all kinds of fora in small groups and lay out all the information that was known, and therewith evaluate if it was really a good decision or if it, in this case, was just a bit of luck. Anyway, let's not talk too much about poker.
Yeah, sorry,
But actually about product strategy. And maybe there are some questions that you would like to see answered around product strategy. And we won't necessarily be answering them during this session because we only have half an hour, but we will try to answer them via the community portal from Xebia Academy. So if you have any questions that you would like to see answered, please share them, and we'll try to get back to you on those questions in the community.
Yep. We should put some waiting music. These are good questions. Defining and sharing, participating.
Yeah, some good stuff is already coming in.
Yeah, I like it. Let's keep that rolling, and let's dive into the material. Maybe we have time for Q&A at the end, and we can pick up one or two of them, and the rest we'll answer in the community portal of Xebia.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, well, the questions, just let them keep rolling in, and we'll switch to the first topic, and that's overcoming switching costs. So, Chris, when talking about product strategy, there are some interesting concepts to consider, like overcoming switching costs. And switching costs is basically what effort or time or money would it take a customer to switch from your product to your competitors, or to switch from your competitor's product to yours, or maybe from one vendor to the others. But what are some things that a product manager could consider, or a product owner could consider, if they want to help their customers to overcome these switching costs? What do they need to pay attention to?
Yeah, great question. So basically, when we look at a product is something that solves a problem for our users, but there might be different ways of actually solving that problem. There might be something they're using today, and your product is just an improvement on that. But I'm already having a process or a means to get that job done. So why would I switch? That's one of the key questions. And once I've onboarded with your product, how can I actually make sure that people stay there? And in the end, it is about the long-term product or the long-term problem that your product solves. And we just came up with a couple examples. Everybody knows SAP. SAP is an enterprise resource management system or planning system, ERP. And in essence, what they do is they help you to automate your internal processes. And by doing so, you adapt your systems and the way of working more or less to either the product or the product gets adapted to your way of working, making it very expensive to actually switch from your proposition and your product to something else. Another great way of what I liked as an example, you can't really see it on the picture, is Picnic. Picnic is a grocery delivery service in the Netherlands. And what they did really well is not just the delivery of the groceries, but they optimized this entire logistics process. And in particular, the last mile, the mile that you bring your groceries to the customers, by developing a specialized electrical vehicle. And this electrical vehicle is a smaller wheelbase, can get to places where other delivery mechanisms cannot come that easily. And the entire process is optimized around it. So they have these little totes, like plastic bags that baskets that they have in the car, and they get pre-packed, but they also have the same size that they fit in their refrigerators. So they can actually pre-refrigerate stuff and just get the totes and put them in the car. And the whole string is so optimized that it's really difficult to find a supplier that can do it in the same fashion. It's not impossible, but there's a very high cost switching. And by doing it, they create a very effective ecosystem whereby somebody comes to your door and actually gives you your groceries, and you can just put them in your kitchen and just pick them up. And I think that's a great way of thinking about not just the product being groceries, but also the entire chain around it, and making it very difficult to actually switching to some other supplier. And at the same time, making it easy to switch from what we used to do, which is go to the grocery store and just get your groceries. So they really make that easier to step into and not so easy to step out of. And the third aspect would be the long-term vision of what your problem is trying to solve. Go back to what was the problem that we were trying to solve. And I put in a picture of a car. We're using a navigation system. Some of you may know I have a background from TomTom. And basically the problem that TomTom solves is find your way the easy way. But in real life, it's about avoiding a fight with your spouse. Because we both know where do we want to go, and we may have different opinions, but in the end, it's better when a machine tells you what the right route is. And this is such a core problem that it doesn't depend on the product that you're actually using. You could use a physical device, which we used to sell in the past. You could use a mobile app, or you could use a built-in navigation system like this gentleman is doing. But the core element is finding your way, and for this, the core proposition is actually having a very accurate map. And that's something that TomTom is still doing. They're selling the maps now to Apple, they're selling the maps to Uber, they're selling the maps to Tesla to make sure that autonomous vehicles can find their way the easy way. And making it very difficult to switch because they have this core data on what the world looks like. And I think that's the key thing you should look for as a product manager. What is the long-term problem that I'm solving, and how can I build my strategy around that? And then be flexible on the details.
Interesting. Yeah, and definitely we're also seeing some examples here that kind of relate to the next topic. So SAP, CRM or ERP systems, that's kind of a established market nowadays. I guess navigation systems pretty much are as well. And so there's this difference when setting up product strategy, and it has to do with blue ocean versus red ocean strategies. Where blue ocean strategies are basically we're entering a whole new market, or we're launching a whole new kind of a product which doesn't exist yet, maybe a whole new type of products or services. And a red ocean strategy is much more a saturated market. So there are already quite a few competitors there, and maybe the battles are more on price, offering good products and services for the best price than other aspects. So how do you view these differences?
Well, there is money to be made in a red ocean, but it's not my preference. It's often a very difficult fight. You don't want to fight with sharks. That's where the reference of red ocean comes from. But again, I found a couple of examples, and I always try to use images. Tesla is, of course, a driving computer. They flipped the idea of the market that a car is a mechanical thing that just happens to have some electronics inside of them, to the idea being that the software is the centerpiece and the car is built around it. And it allows you to do different things, like on the right-hand part of the screen, you can see the LiDAR data that is processed in trying to detect not only people, but also bicycles and other cars, and come up with a navigation system that allows you to find your way, but also not drive into people. And you can do that when you make software the centerpiece of your car. And that's the way they created a market for themselves and created a fan base. Another thing that's happening in Japan is the development of robotics, in particular in healthcare. And so rather than going into, for example, industrialized robotics or training better nurses, they realize that there is a need that there will be a larger need for healthcare workers. Japan has a very aging population, and the idea of bringing in robotics to help people, comfort them, and nurse them in a way is starting to fall more and more to robotics. So that's interesting. And a third example would be the Nintendo Wii. And for those of you who may not remember, when the Wii was introduced, there were already gaming computers. And gaming computers were like really heavy pieces of machinery. They had the best GPUs, the best CPUs. They were really fast, powerful computers, beautiful games. And Nintendo came actually with a very low performant product on the market, something that was not really seen as a competition. And they target not just the gaming part, but they targeted family part, so family time, play games together with your children. have this new interface controller. And this, rather than competing with Xbox and PlayStation, they created a new market. Now, 3 questions that you could ask yourself is, looking at my problem or my product and the problem that it's trying to solve, if I were to look 5 years ahead from now, would more people have this problem, or would they have it more often, or would they experience more pain from it? And if you can sort of use these questions to guide your idea whether you're in a growing market or not. And that's kind of important. When you sell in a new market, it's kind of easy. The customer has a burning need. He adapts to the tooling. He adapts to your solution. He typically takes a bet on you and buys quickly. And he might even be a channel selling to other people. Whereas if there's an established market, the customer already has a solution. And now the tool has to adapt to the customer. And it's not so much about a burning need, but it's about optimizing something that's already being done. And since there already is a product, the customer won't avoid a risky move. So he won't take a risk on you. And typically, these are the kind of products that go through procurement. And as product managers, we know what that means. So that's not really where we want to be. So we want to be at a high level where we can just sell the product and then have them be an advocate rather than go through procurement and be a replacement.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Interesting differences in dynamic as well for a company. Launching products in a red ocean versus a blue one brings a whole different spirit in the development teams as well. Mm. So another interesting aspect to this is that products should align with or extend to or fit within the brand promise of the company or the brand. But that might also mean that the brand or the product brand might thus be different from the company brand. Is that correct? So do you have any tips to share on this?
Yeah, so my biggest tip would be look at all the traits or elements that I've put on this slide. I think about what trait signals emit your reputation, and maybe a small interaction exercise for the people on the chat. What do you think that Evian is trying to emit when you look at the brand picture, which is the left-hand side, and the actual product on the right-hand side? Maybe you can type in the chat what you think Evian is trying to signal. Yeah, purity, clarity. It's that's what I'm trying to, and you see it. It's different from the actual cleanness. Yeah, absolutely. Trust. Yeah. So it's really about pure and clarity, and the product is just water. Let's try another one. Revealing my age here. Yeah. Youth, freedom, strong and sexy. This is a power woman. And everything she does revolves on that image. There's another one. Yeah, visionary. Old-fashioned. maybe old-fashioned, but I think things like thought through and think different, creative, innovative. Those are words that people resonate with Steve, and by extension, the entire brand of Apple products is trying to emit those signals. Whether it's true or not, you can debate. But that's the thing that they're trying to do. So think very clearly about what trade signals do you want to emit from your company, from your brand, and from your product. And then think for everything that you do, add to your product backlog or put on your product roadmap, is this in unison with the signals that I'm trying to emit? Yeah, something to think about.
All right. Which leads us to the final element that we would like to discuss today, or at least that we have prepared today, which is making your product defensible against copy. And that's kind of interesting. How can we make our product defensible against copy? And then we don't mean literally duplicating your book or anything, But how do you set up a business that is basically hard to copy by your competitors? And for example, companies like Netflix, they put a lot of focus on this, and they do that through a couple of different ways. So, Chris, can you share some concepts that the product managers can consider to make their product harder to copy?
I think this is where product strategy sort of shines, trying to build like a barrier to entry or a defense against fast followers. And a lot of that has to do with what I call Kano's tyranny. Oh my God, tyranny. And I'm not
Difficult
referring
word.
to, yeah. My mind was thinking about Professor Kano, the guy who invented judo, of course. But in this case, Kano is a marketing expert from Japan, and he came up with this concept that some features, functionalities, requirements that you put in your product are a surprise, they're a novelty, they're a delighter, they're something that draws people to your product. But at some point, this becomes the standard, and these things deflate to, well, basically what everybody expects to there. And after that, they fall down to the point that, well, if you don't have them, it's kind of a bad thing. I think it was 1970 something, somewhere around there, the first seatbelts were introduced in cars, and it was a novelty. So you'd be safer when you crashed into something. That was really a delighter for, maybe not for everybody because it felt restraining as well, but it was the idea of making a car more safe. And it was a novelty, it was a new thing. At some point, it became standard, right? You need to have, say, a safety belt, and they need to be in line with what everybody else has. But now it's kind of a detractor. Adding more of it doesn't help you. If I have 37 safety belts in my car, I'm not going to pay more for it. So that's basically what Kano does. So even if you have a head start in a blue ocean, at some point it becomes the norm. And then there's a couple of ways how you can defend against that. And one of them, I think Apple made a great example by creating an ecosystem. They created a system of elements that sort of work together. And the main reason why I would not so easily switch from Apple to another supplier is because my entire ecosystem in my house is all tied in together. And switching a phone, which would be doable, would cause a lot of issues on the other end. And the same goes for people who have an Android phone and have built their ecosystem around Android. There are even apps in the Apple Store saying, hey, if you want to switch from Android, download this app and we'll migrate all your stuff over to Apple. And there's an app in the Android store saying, hey, if you want to migrate from Apple, there's an app for that, and they will migrate all your stuff. They're trying to lower the barrier of entry, but still it's difficult. Another one would be like economies of scale, right? So maybe you have a way of building a lot of the elements of the product, like with container shipments. This is the largest container ship in the world. And actually by shipping so much at once, they lower the cost of the individual item. So that's also a way of creating a defensible position, because newcomers don't have that volume. Sometimes you can piggyback on top of an existing product, make the volume larger, and then sort of try to stand on your own. There's other stuff like vendor lock. We already talked about it, but things like customer loyalty, IP, patents. What Facebook basically did was this kind of network effect, right? So when somebody in your family switches to Facebook, they started out sending invites to people they know, saying, hey, join us. And the more people that are in the system, the more people they attract. And that's also a way of creating a defensible position where your customers are basically doing your marketing for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think looking at one of the items you just mentioned, IP and patents, I think that relates to what Fred was sharing in the chat about Netflix having unique content that others aren't allowed to share. And it's much more focused indeed on the IP side of it.
That is also why Disney pulled all their resources from Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah, ports, like you mentioned, making sure.
Yeah, and there you see it's not just economies of scale, it's also the entire network, because it's not just the container ship. It's also it starts with the government making the waterway low enough that the ship can actually get there, like we did in Rotterdam. We have the infrastructure to remove the containers very efficiently, so the ships can go very fast, but also the infrastructure to get the containers and distribute them throughout the entire country and even up to Germany. So you need a lot of companies around that to build that. And having that infrastructure in place is a great way. Scania in Zwolle has a contract with a tire factory in Luxembourg. And every point in time, there are trucks with tires driving up and down between Luxembourg and Zwolle to make sure that they have just enough tires in store. So they can have this just-in-time processing mechanism. But they rely on a network of companies that help them to do that. And that's really difficult to copy and it's really difficult to break.
All right. Well, those are some interesting aspects to look at when talking about product strategy. And of course, we're wondering which of these aspects might be interesting to consider for your product. And maybe you can share some of those ideas via the chat. So would it be more interesting to take a look at overcoming those switching costs, helping your customers to more easily switch to your product? Maybe reconsider, are we in a blue or a red ocean? And what can we do over there to make some changes in the strategy? Can you or need you to do anything about aligning with the brand promise, or can you communicate that brand promise some more in your product? Or how can you be more defensible against copy? Which of these would be interesting to reconsider for your product?
Ronald's going to look at aligning the product with brand promise. Yesterday, I learned that Harley Davidson also has a sub-brand of racing bikes, which is not named Harley. So sometimes you don't want to associate two brands, a product brand with your company brand, but be very conscious about it. Having a monopoly. If you figure out how that works, teach me.
I guess every product manager here wants to know how to do that. So once you figure it out, then we would be happy to have you here talk a bit about how to build a monopoly. Work for the government.
Is using open source tools prohibitive to making a product defensible from Bernard Leusing? Probably not. TomToms run at Linux, then they ran at Android. So tons of companies use open source, but it supports your product. It's not a core of the product. You build something on it. Think of that like electricity, water, gas. It just, that's not part of my product. It's something I use.
Troy also has a funny comment. Don't become too big of a monopoly. Otherwise, the anti-competitive people come knocking on your doors. All right, awesome.
Yeah, I think that's good enough. So we'll share all this stuff on the community portal as well. So thanks.
Yes, yeah. Maybe I want to switch to the last part, because there's 2 more books that you wanted to share, I think.
Yeah, so a couple of things you could. Everybody should read The Art of War, because it's probably the best book on strategy. And the second book is from Roman. Roman Pickler wrote a book on Strategize, which has some practical tips. And otherwise, you should, of course, read what we think about how you could use. Maybe a practical thing. Robin, you wrote a blog about this.
Yes, and since it's time and some people are dropping out, just go ahead and read it.
Yeah, go and read it. Figure out how you can use the sprint review to inspect and adapt your product strategy.
All right. Yeah. So I would say thank you all again for joining this episode. Looking forward to seeing you next week, and have a great day.
Absolutely. See you around. Wow. I need to look at those transitions.
Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this episode, move on to the next one, or
join us or follow us on Medium and LinkedIn to get inspired with even more content.
Or come to our training.